For 3 hours today, President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin met at a summit in Helsinki. And though the meeting's now in the history books, the fallout and the political tax have just begun. Now, so much of the commentary today was devoid of even the slightest hint of context or history, so we thought we'd try to rectify that tonight. He was following a strategy that he's used effectively with Xi Jinping of China and Kim Jong-un of North Korea. And the president, of course, was gracious and chummy with Vladimir Putin today. President Trump prefers to turn on the charm in person while using the hammer and sickle behind the scenes. But the president made his objective clear. He was there to begin a true reset of our relationship with Russia.
Cooperation between our two countries has the potential to save hundreds of thousands of lives. We have 90% of nuclear power between the two countries. As president, I cannot make decisions on foreign policy in a futile effort to appease partisan critics or the media or Democrats who want to do nothing but resist and obstruct. I would rather take a political risk in pursuit of peace than to risk peace in pursuit of politics.
I think that was my favorite line of today. Well written. The two leaders did hit on a range of key issues.
We also discussed one of the most critical challenges facing humanity, nuclear proliferation. Discussed the scourge of radical Islamic terrorism. I addressed directly with President Putin the issue of Russian interference in our elections. Spent a great deal of time talking about it.
And indeed, it was on that subject of Russian interference in our election where the president gave kind of a verbal gift to his critics.
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Don't use the word strong and powerful. Immediately following the presser, though, you would have thought that Trump actually had defected to Russia, given the mass hysteria.
You have been watching perhaps one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president.
He's with someone, like Putin, who is a thug, a world-class thug, that he sides with him again and again against his own country's interests.
You have the president, the leader of the free world, taking the word of Vladimir Putin, who, from all accounts, inside the U.S. government, the U.S. intelligence community, the law enforcement community, attacked American democracy in 2016. They came across as playmates on a soccer field.
You should call this the Surrender Summit.
Surrender? Now, did I miss something today? Did Donald Trump withdraw U.S. sanctions on Russia? Or did he invite back those 60 diplomats and others he expelled in March from Russia? Did he cancel future sales of lethal weapons to the Ukraine? Of course he didn't. But he might as well have, given the media and liberal hyperbole on what happened today. Today, Obama's CIA director, John Brennan, tweeted in part, Donald Trump's press conference performance in Helsinki rises and exceeds the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors. It was nothing short of treasonous. And I just laugh about that. And why did no one call it surrender, by the way, when in 2009, President Obama nixed the European missile defense shield that was to be built in Poland? Was that a surrender to Putin? Or was it a surrender or collusion when Obama asked Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev for a little favor until the 2012 election was over?
This is my last election. Yeah. After my election, I have more flexibility. Yeah.
I understand. I transmit this information to Vladimir.
I mean, they're holding hands there. They're practically spooning. What was that? A profile in patriotism? And I don't recall the media kicking up any fuss when Obama joined Cuban dictator Raul Castro for a baseball game or normalized relations with that murderous regime. By the way, a puppet of Russia. Now, you can also say this. Trump clearly should not have created any semblance of moral equivalency between our intel community, even if it has its flaws, which it does, and the assurances of Vladimir Putin. As the recent indictment of Russian agents alleged, there was meddling in the election. Bipartisan members of congressional panels concluded that. So did our Director of National Intelligence. But it also, no sense that it affected the outcome of the 2016 election, and no Americans were named in last week's indictment. So President Trump probably should have said it that way, or said that, addressed it that way. Instead, he kind of committed an unforced error. But look, the president is right at the same time to be frustrated by the anvil that the deep state has hung around his neck for 2 years now. First, the elements within the FBI, Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. And now, Mueller and his ever-expanding team. And we know inside the DOJ, they basically protected Hillary Clinton while attempting to damn and undermine the legitimacy of Trump's election. And this gnaws at the president. And it perhaps explains why he let those wounds get the better of him today. But it is a good thing to improve our relationship with Russia. And at the same time, we cannot appear to buy their obvious deception while we're standing on the world stage. And, you know, I'm doing a lot of while at the same times, but this is a complicated thing. And I think while insulting Putin on camera, like doing that, like Donald Trump versus Vladimir Putin in a total insult fest, that wouldn't have accomplished anything. At the same time, there are other subtler ways to make our concerns and our objections known. And the president should have taken that path. U.S. National Intelligence Director Dan Coats issued a statement in the wake of the summit today. He said the following: "We've been clear in our assessments of Russian meddling in the 2016 election and their ongoing pervasive efforts to undermine our democracy. And we will continue to provide unvarnished and objective intelligence in support of our national security." Now, setting aside the overly dramatic reactions and even the president's, at times, poor or unfortunate word choice, let's look for a moment at what Trump is substantively doing vis-a-vis Russia. He's building up the U.S. military. Key. At a NATO summit, he called out the German-Russian Nord Stream gas pipeline, that scheme, Nord Stream 2. In March of this year, he imposed sanctions on 5 Russian entities and 19 individuals for interfering in the 2016 election. The media don't like to remind you of that one, of course. That doesn't fit their narrative. And, of course, he closed the Russian consulate in Seattle. And, as I alluded to earlier, he expelled Russian diplomats and suspected spies, 60 of them. So, if Trump is Putin's poodle, he has a really odd way of showing it. As Walter Russell Mead wrote in American Interest last year, if Trump really was a Russian mole, he would be doing things like the following: limiting fracking as much as possible, blocking oil and gas pipelines, cutting U.S. military spending, and trying to tamp down tensions with Russia's ally, Iran. But Trump's doing none of that. So the selective indignation on the left is truly hilarious. They keep changing their stories. For decades, they favored a conciliatory stance, first toward the Soviet Union, then toward the Russian Federation. And now they're all pretending to care about Russia and casting Trump as a Putin surrogate. But it's good to remember just a few years ago how certain liberals reacted when then presidential candidate Mitt Romney suggested that Russia was a foe.
The 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, the Cold War has been over for 20 years.
In many of the areas where we are working to solve problems, Russia has been an ally.
Governor Romney's answer, I thought, was incredibly revealing. He acts like he thinks the Cold War is still on. Russia is still our major adversary. I don't know where he's been.
Mitt Romney talks like he's only seen Russia by watching Rocky IV.
So which is it? Should we be getting closer to Russia and Putin, or should we have a dynamic of constant confrontation and hostility? The liberals change their views, clearly depending on which party has the White House. I think in the end, what really matters is how Trump handles the Russian relationship going forward. So despite some of these verbal missteps, the president has already put us, I think, in a better position by engaging Russia and opening dialogue. It's just a start. And that's the angle.